Caroline had always had a careful stride, a reflection of her 5-month pregnancy. Her substantial body, more a result of her natural build than the pregnancy itself, made people unaware of the little being growing inside her. She wore loose, comfortable clothes, preferring dark colors that concealed her condition even further. Every morning, she descended the stone steps of the underground passage that led to the other side of the city. This tunnel, illuminated by yellowish lamps, had become a refuge for the homeless. It was more than just a route for Caroline, it was a daily lesson in humility and compassion. On that day, as she walked, she stopped beside an elderly woman with tangled hair and a carved cane. "Good morning, Mrs. Rose," Caroline said, handing her a cup of hot coffee she had bought from a nearby cafe. The woman smiled with gratitude. "You always brighten my day, dear Caroline." Caroline smiled back, feeling a gentle touch on her belly. "And this little one here loves to see you too," she teased as she continued her way. Caroline bumped into a young man with a cane and dark glasses. "Sorry, sir, do you need something?" she asked. "Something to eat would be nice," he mumbled. She quickly handed him a sandwich wrapped in paper. "Have a good day," she said, giving his shoulder a light squeeze. When she emerged from the underground passage, a familiar and disapproving voice called out to her. Caroline, it was Daniela, her neighbor, with a scowling face. "Why do you insist on helping these people? You barely have enough for yourself." Caroline looked at her patiently. "Because everyone needs a little kindness, Daniela. I see more than just the homeless. I see people who, like me, face daily struggles. And if I can ease someone's pain, even for a moment, then it's worth it." Daniela rolled her eyes. "You're too naive." With a sigh and a gentle smile, Caroline replied, "Perhaps, but I'd rather be naive and happy than cynical and bitter." And she continued on her way, leaving Daniela behind deep in thought. St. Mary's Orphanage was always surrounded by a melancholic quietude, interrupted only by the subdued laughter and whispers of the children. Caroline was one of the older ones, having grown up under the weathered bricks and leaky roof of the place. Whenever she looked at the yellowed photograph she kept in her drawer, the only memory of her parents, both with tired eyes and faces marked by addiction, a solitary tear would escape. "Are you looking at that photo again?" asked Jane, her only friend in the orphanage, lying on the bed next to her. "It's all I have of them," Caroline replied, caressing the image with her finger. "They had their problems, but they were my parents." Jane sighed. "You have big dreams, Caroline. I can see it in your eyes." Caroline smiled shyly. "I want to study economics, maybe one day have my own business. I want to give my child a better future than I had." Things began to change when Caroline met Alaric. He was her opposite, the son of a wealthy landowner, always impeccably dressed and exuding an aura of privilege. But something clicked between them. Nights under the starry sky, shared laughter, and passionate looks marked the beginning of their romance. "You know, my family will never accept this, right?" Alaric said one night as they walked hand in hand through his family's farm. Caroline, at his side, replied, "I know, but it doesn't change how I feel about you." Alaric gazed at the horizon. "Maybe we should run away together." But fate had other plans. When Caroline discovered she was pregnant, the news hit Alaric's family like a hurricane. "This is unacceptable," Lord Alaric's father said in a stormy family meeting. "You can't have a child with an orphan. Think of the family's reputation." Caroline, heartbroken, listened to it all from a hidden corner of the house. She knew their relationship was doomed in the face of Alaric's family's prejudice and judgment. Alaric, with teary eyes, found Caroline. "I'm so sorry," he whispered, embracing her tightly. "I really am." Caroline, trying to be strong, replied, "Me too, but our child doesn't deserve this world. He deserves something better." And so, with a heavy heart, she walked away from the only love she had ever known. The university campus was always bustling with activities and dreams. However, Caroline walked among the buildings with a more serious expression than usual. She glanced at bulletin boards, finally stopping in front of the administration office. After taking a deep breath, she entered. "Miss Williams," the secretary said upon seeing her. "What brings you here, Caroline?" Hesitating, Caroline replied, "I need to drop out of college. Life circumstances have led me to make this decision." The secretary looked at Caroline with a mixture of surprise and compassion. "I understand. Take care." Days later, Caroline wore a blue uniform and was armed with a bucket and a broom. Her new job as a janitor wasn't glamorous, but it provided her with the money she needed. Gradually, she got used to the routine, even though the work was physically exhausting and sometimes disrespectful. On a particularly cold morning, as she crossed the underground passage to get to work, she noticed a young man with crutches looking disoriented. His eyes met Caroline's, and he attempted to smile, but there was deep sadness there. "Hello," he said, his voice hesitant. "Could you help me?" Caroline, already running late, replied hurriedly, "I'm sorry, I'm rushing to work now, but I promise I'll come back later with something for you." The day was tough. Caroline's boss, a grumpy man named Mr. Stanley, reprimanded her several times for minor mistakes, adding to the weight of her exhaustion. However, she stayed strong, remembering the commitment she had made that morning. After an exhausting shift, with her back aching and her hands calloused, she stopped at a small cafe. Using almost her entire day's salary, she bought sandwiches, water, and some fruit. "Someone special waiting?" the attendant asked, noticing the care with which Caroline selected the items. Caroline smiled gently. "Just someone who needs a little kindness." And so, with the determination of a mother in her heart, she returned to the underground passage, ready to fulfill her promise. The wind whispered through the concrete columns of the underground passage, carrying with it a scent of impending rain. Caroline, with paper bags in her hands, made her way back to that part of the city that most people preferred to avoid. The faces of the homeless brightened upon seeing her, recognizing the woman who often brought them some relief. Approaching the young man with crutches, she noticed that he was talking to an older man with graying beard and weary eyes. "William," she said, extending a sandwich and a bottle of water to him. "I hope this helps." William looked at the sandwich and then at Caroline, his eyes welled up. "You didn't have to do this, but I'm truly grateful." Caroline, looking at the crutches and feeling a special connection with the young man, carefully took out a $100 bill from her purse and handed it to him. "I know it's not much, but I hope it helps you find a safe place to stay for a while." Before William could protest, three imposing figures emerged from the shadows, their faces concealed by hoods. "What do we have here?" the leader said, approaching William and trying to snatch the money from his hand. Without thinking twice, Caroline intervened, placing herself between William and the assailants. "Leave him alone," she shouted, her voice trembling but determined. The leader paused for a moment, assessing Caroline. He seemed surprised by her courage. "You don't know what you're getting into, lady." Out of the corner of her eye, Caroline saw the older man whom William had been talking to earlier silently approaching with a piece of wood in hand. With a swift and precise movement, he struck the leader on the head, causing him to stagger. "Get away from her," the man roared, revealing a strength and vigor that his appearance didn't suggest. The other two assailants, realizing they were at a disadvantage, quickly retreated, taking the leader with them. Caroline, still trying to control her rapid breathing, turned to the older man. "Thank you, and who are you?" "David," he replied with a friendly smile, "a veteran homeless man and occasionally a guardian angel." She smiled back. "Take care of William, please. He's special." David nodded. "You got it. The city has its dangers, but it also has its protectors." And with that, He and William disappeared into the shadows, with Caroline watching them go, recognizing that sometimes heroes come from the most unlikely places. The dawn painted the sky in pastel hues as Caroline left her modest house for another day of work. She was still a bit shaken by the events of the previous night, but she was determined to move forward. As she closed the gate, a familiar figure awaited her at the end of the sidewalk. William was there, dressed in a neatly pressed white shirt, dark pants, and polished shoes. His crutches, although still present, looked new and more sturdy. In his hands, he held a beautiful bouquet of red roses, dewdrops still glistening on the petals. "William," Caroline murmured, surprised, her heart skipping a beat. He smiled shyly, extending the flowers to her. "For you. Not only for yesterday, but for all the times you were kind when the world wasn't." Caroline touched and accepted the bouquet. "You didn't have to, William. Helping you was, well, it was the right thing to do." "I wanted to thank you," William insisted, "and to show that even in the most adverse circumstances, someone's kindness can brighten another person's world." Caroline hugged the bouquet to her chest, feeling the sweet scent of the roses. "Thank you, William. This means a lot to me." At that moment, the door of the neighboring house opened, and the shadow of a figure projected onto the sidewalk. Daniela, her nosy neighbor, observed the scene with judgmental eyes. Helping beggars and now receiving flowers from them? What will the neighbors think, Caroline? Daniela grumbled. Caroline raised her chin, her eyes gleaming with determination. "That I have amazing friends," she replied, passing by Daniela with renewed grace. Upon arriving at work, despite the gossip and envious looks from her boss, Caroline couldn't help but smile. She placed the bouquet on her desk, a constant reminder of the kindness that exists in the world, even in the most unexpected places. During her lunch break, Caroline sat in a small square near her workplace. She took the bouquet of roses from her bag and placed it on the bench beside her, admiring the beauty of the flowers and allowing herself to dwell on the morning's encounter. As she lost herself in her thoughts, a coworker, Claire, approached and sat next to her. "That's a beautiful bouquet," Claire commented, her curious eyes fixed on the roses. "Is it from someone special?" Caroline smiled. "A friend who showed me something important today." Claire tilted her head, clearly interested. "And what would that be?" "True kindness, the kind that comes from the heart, can transform lives. Not only of those who are helped, but also of those who help," Caroline explained serenely. Claire seemed thoughtful. "That's an interesting perspective. We usually think of helping as a one-way street." Caroline nodded. "It's a cycle. When you give sincerely, you not only change someone's life, but also shift your own perspective on the world. And sometimes, the universe has a surprising way of showing its gratitude." Claire looked at the bouquet again, now with a glimmer of understanding in her eyes. "I think you're right, Caroline. Maybe all of us should try to be a little more compassionate." Caroline smiled, satisfied. Change starts with us, and sometimes all it takes is a simple gesture to initiate a wave of kindness. That night, Caroline met her friend Mandy at a small local cafe. The dim lights and soft music created an atmosphere conducive to heartfelt conversations. Mandy, stirring her tea, asked, "How have you been feeling since the incident with Alaric and his family?" Caroline sighed, looking at the steam rising from her cup. "You know, Mandy, it's hard to explain. His family is so depressing, not just because of their outdated views, but the way they treat each other and everyone around them. It's like they carry a dark cloud wherever they go." Mandy nodded. "I noticed that at that Thanksgiving dinner when we all met. It felt like the energy of the environment was being sucked into some vortex of negativity." "Exactly," Caroline said, excited that her friend understood. "And it's so contradictory. They have everything, money, properties, status, and yet they're so miserable." Meanwhile, Mandy continued, a smile playing on her lips, you find happiness and kindness in a homeless person. Caroline laughed. William is truly special. It's amazing how someone who has so little can be so generous and kind. He reminds me that true wealth isn't in material possessions, but in the kindness we carry in our hearts. Mandy raised her cup in a toast. To true wealth, then. The two friends laughed, celebrating the unexpected paths life offers. After the unexpected encounter in the underground passage, Caroline and William began to see each other. The corner cafe became their favorite meeting spot. Amid shy smiles and intense gazes, their friendship blossomed into something deeper. On a chilly evening, they met at a small Italian restaurant with flickering candles on the tables and a soft melody in the background. As they shared a tiramisu, William joked, "You know, I never thought I'd enjoy going out with a janitor so much." Caroline laughed, playfully pushing him. "And I never imagined I'd fall for a man with crutches I met in an underground passage." They both laughed, and amidst the laughter, conversations, and moments of comfortable silence, Caroline felt something special. She hadn't felt in a long time, a true connection. But after a series of charming dates, William disappeared for 2 days. Caroline tried calling and texting, but there was no response. Worry grew in her chest with each passing hour. He seemed so genuine. Caroline confided in her friend Mandy. "I was starting to believe in love again, and now he just vanishes. Without a trace." Mandy, trying to reassure her, replied, "Maybe something happened. Perhaps he needs space. Give him time, Caroline. If it's true, he'll come back." But deep down, Caroline couldn't shake the feeling of desolation, wondering if she had been too quick to trust someone again. Caroline sat in the corner cafe, her eyes continually shifting to the door every time she heard the entrance bell. Her heart would skip, hoping to see William's familiar face. Her coffee, now cold, was a mere reflection of her feelings. However, a tall, imposing figure walked in. William? No, he looked different. He was no longer using his crutches and was dressed in a sharp black suit. What was most shocking was the badge attached to his waist, gleaming under the cafe's light. FBI. Caroline stood up abruptly, almost knocking over her chair. William, but what, how, why? Her thoughts were racing. He ran his fingers through his hair, appearing nervous. Caroline, I need you to listen to me. I wanted to tell you earlier, but I was undercover. She furrowed her brow, confused. Undercover? What do you mean? William sighed, taking Caroline's hands in his. I was on a mission, Caroline. That underground passage, it's been a drug trafficking point for the past few months. My task was to infiltrate it, disguised as a homeless person, to find out who was behind it. Caroline was speechless. The two stared at each other for a long moment. She finally whispered, "Why didn't you tell me?" He lowered his head. I didn't want to put you in danger, and to be honest, the less you knew, the better. But after that night when you helped me, I knew I couldn't keep deceiving you. Caroline's emotions were a roller coaster, surprise, anger, sadness, but above all, concern. Are you okay? Did they find out anything about you? William nodded. Everything's under control now. I just wanted you to know the truth. Caroline, still processing everything, simply nestled her head on William's shoulder, relieved that he was safe, but anxious about what the future might hold. Caroline pulled back slightly, looking deep into William's eyes, searching for any sign of insincerity. Her eyes were filled with conflicting emotions. William, all of this, was it just part of your mission? Was I just a pawn in your game? William swallowed hard, clearly affected by the intensity of Caroline's gaze and the depth of the question. He struggled for words. His FBI training hadn't prepared him for such an emotional confrontation. Caroline continued, at first, it was all about the mission. But then every moment with you, every laugh, every conversation, it changed everything. I can't deny that initially, I was there for professional reasons. But what I feel for you now is real. More real than anything I've ever felt. Caroline felt her heart beating rapidly. She was at an emotional crossroads. What if I had met you in a different way, without the disguise, without the mission? Do you think we would still have this connection? William approached slowly, with a sad yet sweet smile. I can't answer the what if, but I know this: if you were able to love that William from the underground passage, with all his imperfections and secrets, I hope you can love this William standing before you now. Before Caroline could respond, William pulled her close, sealing his words with an intense and passionate kiss. In that moment, all her fears and insecurities melted away, leaving only the two of them and an uncertain future. Thank you for joining us today on Deep Stories. Be sure to like and subscribe and hit that notification bell so you don't miss out on our next video.